they know her?
I don't know if my mic is live. I think my mic is live. All right. Okay, calling this meeting to attention. All right. Hi. My name's Christy Matheson. I'm the creative director at the Edinburgh Film Festival, and it's a real thrill to be here today with this terrific panel who we're going to meet in a moment, and just to see so many faces here, which is great. As programmers, we are collectively obsessed with those seats, and not the seats, but the people who choose to occupy those seats. Audiences are the thing that I think programmers love films, but we really love audiences. We're the glue between the artist and the audience, and that's really our job. And so, when we were chatting about this panel today, we were like, oh, what can we talk about? And within a very short space of time, we started talking about you guys. Not in a mean way, we were very nice, but we were really trying to think about who would be our audience today and what would be useful. So today's panel, we're really drilling into tips and tricks and hacks. We're assuming that a lot of you here are filmmakers, or you're thinking about making films, or you have films and you're thinking about how to navigate the exhibition landscape. So if you want to do a show of hands of people who in the room who are making films or who are interested in making films, do we have any? We do. Yay, excellent. All right, get cracking. We want to see that work. And so today we're sort of going to drill into how you navigate this landscape. I'm going to get this terrific group of panelists to do a quick intro of each of them, and we're going to do a quick description of ourselves for the live stream. So my name is Christy. I'm a Caucasian woman with dark hair wearing a spotty jacket, and next to me is...
Hi there, my name's Rachel. I'm a white, youngish woman with brown hair and very large glasses.
Hi, my name's Carmen Thompson. I am a youngish, mixed-race woman with my hair in sort of space buns, wearing a green and black dress.
I'm Alison Gardner, and I am a very old woman with grey hair, and I am wearing a blue dress, and I'm a white older lady of a certain age.
Alison, before we kind of head back up this way, can you just, I'm sure most of our audience here today know who you are and what you do, but if you could give us a little strap line of where you program.
So I am the CEO of Glasgow Film and the co-director of Glasgow Film Festival, so I programme this fantastic festival that you are here at the moment, and I'm the artistic director of the organisation and Glasgow Film Theatre all year round and Glasgow Youth Film Festival, and so I oversee the direction of those film festivals and the cinema all year round.
Thank you. Carmen?
So I'm a freelance programmer, so I'm always working for a different organisation, but at the moment I'm a cultural curator and programmer for an organisation called We Are Parable, and I've also recently joined as a programming consultant at Sheffield Docfest, and I also dabble a bit in distribution as well for an organisation called EIFF Films. So that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment.
Thank you.
So I am a director at Alchemy Film and Arts, which is an arts organisation in the Scottish Borders. We run an annual film festival called Alchemy Film and Moving Image Festival, so I work on the programme for that, and also the year-round community filmmaking programme there, and we specialise in experimental film.
So we've sort of, in talking about what is useful for us as programmers, or how we navigate the films that we see, we started talking about when people are making their films and the kinds, especially in the space of short film, and we really started to drill into potentially, some of those barriers that filmmakers can hit. I was hoping, Rachel, you could speak a little bit about the length of short films. How can short film programmers easily put those films together, and what are some of those barriers?
So I suppose from my experience in experimental film and artist moving image, we do mostly program short films. I think there's a sort of general expectation for filmmakers that you make a short film and then the sort of next graduation is to make a longer film, and we're kind of always trying to combat that myth. So not necessarily to encourage keep your film as short as possible, but to sort of recognise the industry of film festivals in terms of the longer your film is, it's a sort of reality that there will be more competition in terms of the slot that it will fill. You do get festivals such as at Alchemy, who we do make space. We have a few programs each year where we prioritise a single slot for one long short, and we like to generate a longer discussion about that, but that's quite a specialist sort of thing to do. So I guess a sort of encouragement of, if it can be shorter, make it shorter, and don't be embarrassed about that.
And when you say, let's be really specific, what would you say is sort of if you were putting a short film program together, what would be like your dream runtime of a film?
So my dream program runtime would be an hour, and I would probably want sort of 5 films in there, so that quickly becomes a sort of equation. But I like a sort of 3 to 5 minute film, to be really honest.
All right, you've heard it here first. What about you, Carmen? You're especially, you're looking at films for a lot of different organisations, but when you're looking at putting forward short films for festivals, what are some of those barriers if people are bringing in films around the sort of 27-minute mark, the 32-minute mark? What does that do to the film's chances?
To be perfectly honest, it massively reduces it, and I think it's interesting working across a lot of different organisations, and I'm often working to specific briefs. It's like specific to wherever I'm working, and I often get told explicitly that unless a film is kind of exceptional, and sort of like Rachel was saying, that we can build a kind of a whole program specifically about, if it's, it cannot be over 20 minutes, essentially. But I'm similar to Rachel. I really get excited by the kind of shorter work. I think it's really exciting to see what people can do with a really, really short and very tight film. So for me, the shorter, not the shorter the better, but definitely not pushing above 20 minutes for sure.
And I guess, Alison, in thinking about with not just the festival, but when you're programming films for the theatre all year round, do you have opportunities to put short films before features if you can find the right film that is the right runtime to go with a feature?
We have done, and a feature filmmakers 89 minutes perfect. Says the festival that showed 4 hours of Lawrence of Arabia the other day and 5 hours and 10 minutes of a Lav Diaz film in another year. Anyway, no, I do think we do show shorts in front of features. It hasn't been such a feature at the moment, post-pandemic, when we reopened on the 5th of June. That was a bit more like finding our feet, but it's something we work with the Glasgow Short Film Festival on. And they tour to lots of Scottish venues, they tour their short film programme, and finding that not more than 10 minutes to go with a feature is really, really, really important if you're pairing it with the right feature.
Yeah, and I think just, thinking about how those session times work, and like you say, once you've got your feature, and then if you want to put something on top of it, you still want to get everything in that envelope so you can get a few sessions in the day. So then we've made the perfect run time, so we're going to fit into our program, and everyone loves it, and we're in the festival, yay, and then we come to deliver our materials. And Alison, what would be the thing that would super annoy you if I was delivering my film to you and I And I did what? What would make it really hard for you as a programmer?
I sort of know there's some of my staff in the room here, so I'm slightly... quite a lot of things annoy me. So I think...
Just on materials delivery.
Just on materials. I think the lack of images, a lack of a trailer, a lack of communication about what the filmmaker thinks their audience is. I think if you're making the film, you should have an idea, who do you think is at that end process for your film? Who's going to watch it? Who's going to fork over £10 to watch your film? I think it's really important that you're in that space, because it's great to make the work that you've envisaged, but sometimes you maybe need an outside eye to help you with that, in terms of a critical friend perhaps who could help you say, I think this might be for this audience, and that then may inform which film festivals you submit your film to. But deliverables should be great. You should have great stills for the social media people. You should have a great trailer. Even work done while you're making the film is really important. I think, you know, stories around, you know, what happened and how the cast and crew got along, and, you know, things like that are really great for the backstory to help the festival programmers sell your film.
And I guess, so, you know, delivering really great images often helps. You know, you might be the film that gets that image in the program, and so, you know, obviously that's, again, just kind of boosting the profile. But another sort of deliverable that has definitely, you know, I know that on the exhibition side of the fence, we've been talking about it a lot in the last few years, but I'm not sure on the production side of the fence as much, but that's, you know, captioning work and making that work more accessible. And so, Carmen, I'd like you to, if you can chat to us a bit about a company that you've been working with recently and how they've interacted with filmmakers on that process.
Yeah, I think it's been this whole kind of new to many of us. Obviously, this is a conversation many people were having for a very long time. Yeah, when I worked for African Motion in the kind of depths of the pandemic, to the online version, and we kind of made the decision to caption all our films. And we worked with a number of different captioners, including a Glasgow-based company here called Collective Text. And they do incredible work, incredible kind of integrated and creative captioning. And it was really amazing to kind of watch that process. And we had a lot of feedback from the filmmakers about how rewarding they found that process as well. You know, just for example, we worked on an Angolan documentary called Beyond My Steps, which was kind of about dance in Angola. So there was lots of music, there were lots of kind of instruments, and the kind of level of detail that the captioner we were working with went into. They wanted to kind of know which specific instruments were involved. There was, like, you know, dancers, and the material was rubbing, like the material from their skirt was rubbing against each other, and they were asking the filmmakers, do you remember what material that was and what that sound might, you know, how can we help kind of bring out what that sound is to audiences who are going to be using captioning. So I think it's really interesting in terms of like reframing how we think of captioning, not just as this kind of add-on at the end, but really as a kind of a creative process that's where you can think about how can you make your work kind of fully accessible and fully realized for, you know, this huge audience who could engage with it. And like you say, it's interesting to think about how filmmakers and programmers can kind of work together in that process. But I think if you can have it in your mind from the beginning of making your work, you know, you can be making notes about all these things and thinking about how, when you come to create captions, you know, what information you have at your disposal to kind of make that as kind of a holistic and creative process as possible.
And just, Rachel, it'd be great to hear about the experience, you know, from the artist film perspective, because obviously, you know, a lot of artist cinema is, you know, it's really leaving a lot of interpretive, you know, agency for the audience. And so to caption that, to describe that, are you finding that some filmmakers, you know, have some resistance there from an artistic level?
Yeah, and I think it's never, there's always at least one complication. I think maybe the problem comes from assuming that that it is a kind of creative process, although to an extent it has to be. At Alchemy, we like to see it that if anyone's been in the really bad situation of projecting a film and suddenly the sound doesn't work and you're rooting around panicking, where's the audio, what's happening? I suppose we like to see that if a film isn't captioned or without other interpretations, there's no sound for certain audiences, and 60% of our audiences use captions. And
60%?
Yeah, and
wow.
It's not just deaf and hard of hearing audiences. We've had a lot of feedback from people with different kind of neurodiversities and many different reasons that they use captions. But I've had a similar situation with very specific instruments, and we've had a lot of debates with a captioner. So we work with Matchbox Cine Club, and we've had a lot of debates around what a general ear is. If you're very specific about an instrument as well, there's a question of, would someone be able to know that from the sound? So that raises a lot of debate in our office and with the captioner, and I don't think there's a clean answer, but there's somewhere between being so specific that you're actually putting more information than you might hear, but also stripping it back, so you're losing that experimental thing that happens with the sound, that kind of immersive experience. That's a very long answer, but I think that's the point I'm trying to get across. It's complicated.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because it raises a lot of issues. You know, I really like that example you give about saying, you know, and I think we have all been in that horrifically panicked situation where a film is playing and then the sound, you know, or there's a problem with the picture, and yeah, that panicked feeling of I'm missing, and to probably think about, you know, reframing it this way, but then also to think as, you know, as artists and creatives, you know, how you make that process much more rewarding for you as an artist alongside the audience is something really interesting. I want to kind of move back. So we've made our film. It's the perfect run time. We've just got a really good feeling about it, and we're embarking on the process of entering it into festivals. And we're sort of just like randomly, it's a big crapshoot. And then we get these invites and we're excited, and there's like all these documents we're signing, and we're like, yeah, sign. What's the problem if we don't read those terms and conditions, Alison? What might happen to us, and why do we have to sign so much paperwork as filmmakers?
Well, I don't actually make my filmmakers sign a lot of paperwork. I mean, we obviously have a submission process, and there's terms and conditions on there. I think the terms and conditions are there to protect both the filmmaker and the festival, so that you know you're in the right festival. I think I don't think I've come across this particular problem, to be honest. But somebody in my organisation will have, because they'll be doing it, which is why I'm just floating swan-like above it all. But I do think that there has to be a lot of trust, I think, between the filmmaker and the festival. We are still quite a young festival, so we do talk a lot to our filmmakers, and we have that element of direct communication and trust with them. And for me, that's the really important process, because they know us and they know. And we know them. So the filmmakers from Ashgrove, for example, who are here from Canada, they are just lovely, and they could not do enough to help us to sell their film. So you take that element of trust that you are all going in the same direction of wanting an audience to really enjoy the film that they have presented, and that's the space we've been in a lot, this thing. So that's been lovely. So I've not had any problems there yet.
Well, some of the things that I guess, you know, from a festival's point of view, you know, definitely when you look at someone's work and you're like, we love this film, it's going to be great, we're just assuming in good faith that your producers have done all of their legal, you know, they've crossed all their T's, they've dotted all their I's, that terrifically expensive, you know, Beyonce track that you've put in the middle of your film. We are saying, yes, you've got the clearance to do that, and we're not going to get sued. So there's obviously those sort of terms and conditions that we really, as organisations, need to know that filmmakers and their teams have done. But then on the other side, for filmmakers, they are often put in this, Sophie's Choice style decision-making process of what, if I enter this festival, I can't enter this. And so then we get into the territory of what is the difference between an international premiere, a world premiere, a country premiere. Rachel or Carmen, do you want to give us the quick lowdown? Because I feel like we all need this in our back pocket at all times. What's the difference?
I have found that often people don't know about this, so I teach students who some of them make films, and I've said, have you thought about premiere status? And they don't know, so it is worth it. That a film has many premiere statuses. It will be the first time. It can have many firsts. It can be the first time it's shown in an international context. There will be films shown this week that will be the first time they've been shown in the UK. So your film has many different kind of credits in that way. I guess we run into problems. For example, if your film is an experimental film, there might only be a few festivals that might show it. And if those festivals have strict premiere policies, then you can probably only show it in one of those places, if, for example, they're in the UK. So I think this kind of topic is less for filmmakers to kind of work on, and maybe more for festivals to kind of really have a sort of think about who premiere status values. And I'm talking specifically about, artist film here, where the sector is more narrow and perhaps more precarious. I'm not entirely sure. But if the artist is to be of benefit, I think we have to kind of prioritise curation over premiere status. So I could show a film in a programme, a festival a few hours away could show it in another programme, and it might be completely different because it takes meaning. I'm describing a really perfect world and a really blue sky thinking, but that's a kind of personal take on premiere status and a bit of background about kind of potential politics there as well that can be quite difficult to navigate and is worth kind of thinking through when at the stage of submission, really, because with a lot of festivals you do kind of tick a box or sign something that says you are now sort of handing that film over to be programmed there. So it's worth looking into their premiere status policy.
And I think they're the kinds of, terms and conditions, which it can feel like, you're reading an insurance policy or signing up to a phone plan, and if anyone's like me, there's a lot of glaze. So, but I do think that premiere status is something that's really important to keep your eye on, because, it's a gamble. You don't know who's going to take your film, but once it's there, it's obviously not great for you or the film festival or reputationally to be pulling films, but if it precludes you from screening somewhere else, you do need, as an artist, to really take control of that. Carmen, can you talk a bit about how this works when you're programming for, say, international festivals?
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to add sort of, I guess, on what Rachel was saying there. I think, I agree with the whole premiere status thing, and it's actually been quite nice to see a lot of summer festivals kind of like sort of not kind of being as strict with that rule, especially in the last couple of years. So that's been really exciting to see. But I would just say that, and I guess it might be reiterating what some of you said, just thinking about who you want to give that status to. And I know that some festivals obviously have very kind of big reputations, and it might seem like that might be the best place to kind of premiere, but I have seen really unfortunate cases of people giving their premiere to a festival. The festival doesn't necessarily understand the film, it gets kind of lost in their program, and you don't necessarily get that many people coming to see it. And like you say, once you've given it away, you can't really take it back, and it may have lost an opportunity to get kind of a really more kind of engaged audience that maybe slightly smaller, kind of niche festival. So that's something to consider as well. But in terms of international festivals, I programmed for a festival, the first film festival in Saudi Arabia last year. That was a really interesting, experience. And I guess it sort of plays out in a similar way. But in terms of how it worked with programming, we were just instantly dismissing anything that wasn't an international premiere in that region. And it could be...
And sorry, can you just define international premiere for us? Because it's a minefield, people. It's a minefield.
Again, how it was defined within our context. So I was kind of focused on sub-Saharan African cinema. So an international premiere would have been anything that, and if it showed anywhere outside of the African continent, essentially. But often, I think international premiere could be anywhere outside of the country of origin in some places. So again, it's like important to consider that detail. So I think that's it's interesting in that context, and it's also interesting when you're kind of a new festival. When you've got that, even it was interesting to see that they're still holding on to that premise. It is even as a new festival where arguably people they haven't kind of necessarily built a name for themselves. I think that's still kind of really ingrained into how the kind of festival model. But yeah, I don't know if that was useful.
Yeah, and I think it's a really Alison, I saw your comment in Screen International this last week, and I think it's a really valid comment that for me. I think the premier status rule is, it makes sense in very specific places. If you are the Cannes Film Festival, it makes sense. If you are Venice or Berlin, festivals that are at different markers of the year and, start the calendar. So the winter calendar, the autumn calendar. But I do think for audiences, they're becoming increasingly problematic because audiences are missing out on seeing great films in their own hometowns, and it's increasingly making the film festival curatorial landscape really homogenous. So in a country, we're just even thinking about Europe, but definitely thinking about the UK, we'll end up in a place where there'll be, we might end up with two curators, and they'll choose the films, and you'll get bits and dribs and drabs of those choices in your hometown. And if we rethought the premier status outside of those big market-driven industrial spaces, how could we help audiences? How could we help filmmakers? Alison, do you want to speak a little bit about
we
this?
don't have rules around premieres. We just look at the films, and if we love it, we have it. So we're showing Benedetta today, for example. That's already shown at London Film Festival, so it's a Scottish premiere, so to speak. So those things for us are about the love and the curation, I think. And we were quite specific when the festival started, or when Alan and I started programming the festival in 2007, which seems like about 10,000 years ago. And when I go round to the exhibition, I was like, I can't remember that was the opening gala. And like really surprised. Like, did we really have that? That's really great. I'd forgotten all about that. But I think that what we decided is to try and program without prejudice, in the sense that we would just take the films that we really loved. And again, it comes back to Carmen's point. We were a young festival, so we didn't really feel that we could do that. And I think your point about those big market-driven things, that's a marketplace. So those premier things become more important in a marketplace because they're selling to sales agents and things like that. And whilst many films, even at Glasgow Film Festival, have gone on to get distribution across the UK from being at Glasgow, it's not our driving force. The driving force here is about audiences watching great films, and I have to keep always coming back to that same point. It's about audiences enjoying great films, and that is the driving force that we always come back to.
So I guess, for filmmakers then, you're making choices, you've finished your film, and, who do you see when the lights are off and that front row is full? Can you envisage your audience? And it's often difficult because, you might not understand the nuances of all these different festivals and how they're different and who they attract. But maybe we'll start with you, Carmen. Do you want to speak a bit about, how do you help someone define what's a good place to send their film? Like, how can filmmakers do that research from their bedroom?
Wow.
It's hard.
Yeah, no, it's hard, but I think, it's interesting, and I think it's kind of how I'm sort of like a self-taught program. I didn't kind of go do curation at university. Like all of my kind of experience of understanding how festival works came from just like scouring through their programs. And then, you know, when you kind of figure out how you get in the door, maybe you can attend some for free or maybe find ways to get in and kind of understand how they are. Yeah, I think I would start by looking at their program. Kind of if there's other filmmakers, in terms of your own kind of creative practice, if there's other filmmakers you look to who inspire you in your own work, where are they exhibiting their work? Maybe where did they start out? Can you ask, you know, filmmaking circles kind of where they found the most rewarding places to be and to have their work shown? And then, yeah, I guess sort of just, I think when you're starting out, or kind of if you're starting out in the film industry in general, I think certain festivals can be more kind of open and more kind of welcoming to those kind of people. I think a lot of, especially kind of the larger festivals, can be quite sort of industry focused, can be quite kind of exclusionary. So I think it's finding those spaces that are welcoming, that will kind of draw you in, and you can find people that can help you navigate the space. Because I think for me, the whole film world is, you know, it's a kind of collective thing. I don't think anybody can exist on their own. Programming for me is collaborative. I think, you know, filmmaking, I'm not a filmmaker, but I know, you know, it's a collaborative process. So I think it's like finding your people and finding who understands what you're trying to do and how they can kind of help you in your journey. So, yeah.
And Rachel, for people that are working in the artist film space, how can they navigate that and sort of work out where is a good place for their film to start? Or, you know, are there good resources, or is it, as Carmen says, you look at the program, see who else is in the program?
I think that's a good tip, you know, to just look through programs. I think you know, with the artist film, there's such a community there, and I think it's sort of important to remember in every context, whether submission or thinking of where to submit, it's always a mutual relationship between the artist and the festival. It needs to kind of work both ways, so it's okay to phone up or to visit, or, you know, obviously announce that you're going to visit, but it's okay to ask questions and to need more information and to ask to see. For example, you might want to see their access policy, you might want to see what they think about the environment, you might want to see how inclusive they are. It might not just be about the kind of genre of film, and it's okay to ask for these things or to look for these things and to sort of really, you know, make an informed decision, particularly if there is a kind of premier status involved. But kind of remember that, you know, if you're a filmmaker, you're forming their program, so it's very much a two-way relationship. It's not just, I really want this festival and it holds all the power. There obviously is power dynamics there, but I would just always encourage, you know, to read lots and to ask lots of questions, and remember that you can do that.
I think that's really terrific advice, because it feels the power dynamic, you know, it can feel very, you know, out of whack. And so, you know, you've spent a very long time with a team of people making this artwork, and then you're giving it over to an organisation that has its own sort of culture and its own collective art making practice. Alison, what do you think? You know, in terms of once filmmakers sort of, I guess, meet their audience. This week you've got a lot of filmmakers who are meeting their audience for the first time, and I imagine that's very scary, and I imagine it's very exciting. But are there things that you observe that help people through that nerve-wracking process of the screening process?
I mean, I think for us, we've been labelled, and I think it's probably to do with the team and not me, as Glasgow's the friendliest film festival on the planet. I think that's all to do with everybody who works for me rather than people who see me when they do things wrong. But even with a mask on. But I do think that the audience at Glasgow Film, while they come from, you know, all over, there's people from London, there's people from, you know, everywhere. There's a lovely couple from Leicester I was talking to yesterday who will come up for the whole time, and people from Scotland. The audience are genuinely there to love the films and the filmmakers, and so they really, our audience seem to want the film to work, and that's a big thing, that they're not like for anybody who's ever been to a press show, you know, sitting there, the cynical hacks, you know, men usually, sitting there, you know, going like this. The audience really want the film to work, and they really want the filmmaker to tell them their stories, and there's that love and expectation. So that worked really well for us. So the filmmakers are not so nervous, and we tell them what the audience is going to be like, and you know, which cinema they're in and who's going to be hosting, and, you know, what questions would you like us to ask, and what can we pick out from the film that you think is really important. All those sort of things really sort of give them that sort of confidence that we are there to look after both them and their piece of art.
And this is a question for everyone on the panel. Do you think it's important I think that probably fine artists are, you know, the rigor of their training is just sort of, it's inbuilt to be able to speak to your work. But I think for filmmakers, it's hard. People come to filmmaking in lots of different ways, and some people are able to articulate what they've made. Some people, they don't want to talk about that. Do you think it's important for filmmakers to be able to navigate, you know, introductions, Q&As? What are some tips or some pitfalls that you might have seen that you would advise against? Rachel, do you want to kick us off?
It's a good point, you know, because people communicate differently, and if you've made a film, you want that to speak for it. So I think trying to be kind of honest and transparent with comfort levels around Q&As and introductions, and again, asking for things that you might need. I think at Alchemy we're quite aware of this, and we always actually commission writers or internally write a sort of curatorial text around the films, and sort of not necessarily relying on what the artist says about the films, not ignoring that either, because that informs the text, but particularly to sort of support the curation, we usually write the materials, which I think is quite common, but sort of worth saying. But, you know, Q&As can be scary, and I think the important thing, and what I took comfort from, and we had a bit of a chat about this today even, is that it's actually up to the host of the festival or of the panel to do all the work. And if you're there as a guest, you're kind of just chatting. Not that this doesn't work, but but you know, if you're there to speak about your film, it's whoever is hosting that event, it's kind of their job to make you comfortable, but also to sort of string the conversation along. So if anyone's in that situation, you just kind of look to the host.
But I think it's a good point. You know, being about probably flagging maybe with, you know, Alison, you've spoken about that attention and care that you give filmmakers, and giving them a sense of, okay, this is what the cinema's going to be like, and, you know, and Carmen, do you think that there's tips that filmmakers can take into the, you know, those first few festival outings, just to make that introduction sense a bit calmer for them?
I don't know. It's a bit of a tricky one, because I think I speak to so many people that host or are kind of hosted in Q&As, and I think to an extent, if you don't enjoy them, I think sometimes at some level they're not going to, you know, it's always going to be a kind of awkward thing to sit up and talk in front of people. But I think, yeah, and maybe it's speaking to a few things, because I was really struck by what Rachel said about this kind of mutual relationship and this thinking about the power dynamics. I think it's just, and again, what sort of relates to what Alison was saying, like, the audience are there because they're really interested. I think it's so important to just have that in your head, and that anything you tell them about your process is going to be interesting. I think it's I think we can forget when we get really into any practice, we get so into the kind of fine detail of things, that we forget, you know, all the creativity, all the kind of, you know, I don't know, like I think maybe just taking a step back from that, and just like Rachel said, just speaking openly about what it was like, about what inspired you. All these things are just going to instantly be interesting to people, and I think if you just hold on to that, I think it hopefully it will be slightly less awful. And yeah, and just think, you know, you're not there to impress the audience. Like they are there, they want things from you. And yeah, and the same with programmers, because I was going to say, and we're going way back now, but when Rachel said about that relationship, I think you know, as programmers, we are going out and hunting for filmmakers as much as filmmakers are going around looking for festivals. Like, we want you as well as you want us. So I think it's always thinking about those dynamics and never think that there's kind of a hierarchy to things. So I don't know if that's helpful.
No, it's a really good point. And you know, the worst part of a Q&A is the bit where you're like, and this, and then this, and we'll talk about this, and then you're like, is there any audience questions? Yeah. And there's like not a hand up in the room, and you're like, cool, we've got like another like 10 minutes up here. So anyway, I'm asking for audience questions. I have another question for this panel, but if you do have a question, can you please raise your hand or just be like, I'm working on it, and we've got a microphone. But yeah, just that this is your 3-minute warning for questions. So, but the other thing that, you know, Carmen, you touched on this before, some festivals you go to and you think, oh my God, it's going to be great. I'm going to the Cannes Film Festival. It's going to be amazing, and it is. And then you get there and it's like very large and very lonely because you're not there with your gang, and you're like, cool, I'm actually not having a great time. But there's lots of fantastic festivals where filmmakers, and especially short filmmakers, can have a great time. So I asked everyone on the panel to pick the festival that's a good shout, that is a place where you can go and have a good time if you are a short filmmaker, if you're in the process of finding your tribe. So who wants to kick us off?
I'll kick us off. I like San Sebastian mostly because the food is fabulous, / wine. But a film festival that I've never gone to and that I would really like to go to, and I don't know if anybody's been here, is Rotterdam. That looks like, it's good.
It's the joy. Yeah. It's the joy of joy.
It's the wrong time before Glasgow Film Festival. I'm not sure my team would allow me to go at that particular point. But I really like what they do at Rotterdam in terms of looking at the programme. It goes back to the original question. I like that when I look at their curatorial choices. I've just never actually been there. So, and for those of us who did festivals online, can I just say Cannes was rubbish because the rosé I was serving myself was not up to par at night. So that's all I'm going to say about that. By far.
What about you, Carmen? Where would you suggest, you know, people might think to try and get their film in, or even just to travel there as, you know, as a punter?
I'm going to start again with a festival I haven't been to, but a festival that lots of people I know have been, and again, a festival I look to in terms of their programming, especially their short programming, is Black Star Film Festival in America. So they focus on Black, Brown, and Indigenous filmmaking, and I think it's something, again, about what I was saying about really understanding audiences. And I think, you know, if you identify as a Black, Brown, or Indigenous filmmaker, like, you know, I think your film will be in safe hands there. They have an incredible audience base, and, you know, they just create kind of really great experiences around the films. And a couple just like UK ones, I think shout out to Encounters Film Festival in Bristol. I think it's a really great one if you're a short filmmaker. And I also just, it's kind of a cheat, but Glasgow Short Film Festival is like just, I think their programming is incredible, and it's so much fun. Like, you know, like Glasgow Film Festival, I think the audience in Glasgow, are just amazing. So I think it's a great place to look, you know, international filmmaker or local filmmaker.
What about you, Rachel?
It's been so long since I've been to a film festival, so it's lovely to be here this week. So I'm also going to pick one that I'm going to go to in June, actually, this year, and that is Kino Otok in Izola in Slovenia. So I'm going to be presenting a programme there, but I'm also just really excited because it's a sort of similar scale to the festival that I run, and quite sort of community focused and community integrated. It platforms a lot of emerging artists and also a lot of sort of local artists to the region. So I'm really excited about that.
And I would say I had the pleasure of in November going down to York to the Aesthetica Film Festival. I don't know if anyone's been, but it was terrific. The city was very pretty. Obviously, you know, being an Australian, I'm easily wowed by an old building, but there was a lot of those and they were very pretty. But you know, the sessions were really full, and it seemed that there was a lot of, a lot of people just having quite nice moments. It wasn't super formal, and it felt like it wasn't hard to get into sessions. But the other festival that I would really recommend that short filmmakers think about is the Oberhausen Film Festival, which takes place every May in Oberhausen in Germany, and it's the oldest short film festival in the world, but it's such a wonderful event. The way it's curated, they have a meal break during the day for lunch. So there's moments where you can sort of go and eat communally with other people. It's very convivial, and the programming is really exceptional. They have a lot of talks and and really interesting people talking about not just cinema but culture more broadly. But yeah, it's a place that loves short films, and so you can really meet some terrific people there and not feel like it's so big that you can't. But anyway, it's on you guys now. Do we have any questions? Do you have any questions for this panel? And yes, here. Do we need the microphone? We're going to wait for the microphone.
Shirts. Good, the t-shirts. The tote bags. So
hello. Oh, can we hear you?
Hello.
Oh,
hello.
Yeah.
Terrifying. Thanks so much. It's really, really insightful and always interesting to hear everyone's perspectives. I was just hoping to hear from you each how you remunerate your filmmakers, and specifically license fees and box office deals. Not box office. What am I saying? Film terms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So we pay our distributors, we pay our sales agents, and if you've submitted your film, we pay if, for example, you want to come, we cover your travel and accommodation, or if you can't, then you get a cut of the box office.
I mean, it will depend which organisation I'm working for. We are Parable. If we screen anything, we remunerate the filmmakers. And we often leave it up to them if they want a straight screening fee or if they want a portion of the box office, whichever they would prefer out of that. But yeah, again, it would depend on the individual festival that I worked on.
At Alchemy, we pay all the filmmakers fees, and if there's any commissioned work, that obviously goes up depending on the amount of labour and any preparation time. We'll also support travel and accommodation if they want to visit, and we'll make sure they get additional assets, like if an SRT is generated or an audio described file, we'll make sure that they get that as well.
With the artist filmmaking community, I'm interested because obviously that I think for short filmmaking, it's not standard that there are fees paid. I think that traditionally short filmmaking has been not remunerated. Features are, I think, pretty much across the board at most festivals. But I would say the exception for that is artist filmmakers, who I think have always been in a space where their work, does carry a fee. Traditionally, LGBTQI+ short films were the other area of short filmmaking that could often command a fee because, they're very specific programs. I would say that it is slowly changing, but I wouldn't expect that most festivals across the board are paying for short films yet. I think that is coming, but I don't think that is... and I think there's a lot of reasons for that, in the sense of if you're paying a feature film, that's one session, you split that box office out, it becomes very complicated with multiple short films in a program. But I do think that as an industry, we need to come to some kind of standard for short filmmakers. But I would say at the moment, it's probably artist filmmakers and LGBTQI+ filmmakers who are, I would say, the exceptions to the rule. I would not say that most narrative or documentary filmmakers working in the short form are necessarily commanding a fee. Do we have any other? Oh, yes. I'm loving this front row. Just by the way, the other rows are going to have to pick up your game, because at the moment front row is killing it.
I really appreciate your sharings. It's very constructive, and I'm a student from University of Edinburgh studying film creation, and I have a specific question regarding the online film festival, which is like the online film curating. So ideally, how many film released via the on-demand platform per day? Is there any ideal numbers? And I wish to know the audience reception regarding the online film festival between the weekdays and the weekends. So that's my question.
Oh, that's very specific. Shall I take that one? So we are doing a hybrid film festival this year.
Yes.
So we're doing online and public. Obviously, it's a lot easier to tell the in-person screenings, people's reactions, than because we're not obviously cyber stalking those people in their house to see whether they're enjoying it.
You can just imagine Alice there with like a magnifying glass.
Actually, that's not too far. No, that's not true. But I think for us, I think hybrid festivals are interesting because this is a sort of new model. For us especially. I think when we decided to put films online, we wanted the online to be the curated element as well. So for example, all the Audience Award films are online, so everybody across the country can enjoy those and watch them and vote for the first or second time filmmaker's film. I don't know the split yet because we're still in the middle of it, whether the weekends are working better than the weekdays. But also hybrid is a good way to, in this current climate, to help people who are perhaps more nervous about coming back or who can't come back, or there's a whole variety of reasons. It could be access reasons, it could be health reasons, it could be a whole number of reasons that we're not aware of. So that's another way of removing the barrier. But you also have to be careful because these are still premium video on demand films, so you can't put them out for £2, for example, because that just doesn't work for the distributor, the sales agent or the filmmaker. So you have to put them out at the premium on demand. But there could be 4 of you watching it and you've paid £9.99, for example. So it's a very difficult model, but the current industry standard is that if you sell a view of a film online, 2 people are watching it. I think that Sundance used that model last year, so that's the model we use. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Again, front row, I'm loving this.
Yeah, just a quick question about hybrid screenings and how that affects premiere statuses, because obviously if something's online, you can watch it anywhere. I'm kind of thinking for the Glasgow Film Festival, the audience will generally be Glasgow, Scotland based, but who am I to know? There could be people tuning in from all over, and that's great. But how would that affect premiere statuses?
In terms of the films online, they're geo-blocked obviously to the UK. And what we noticed when we did the completely online festival last year was that over 50% of our audience were out with Scotland. So that was really great. We were really pleased about that. And so we wanted to retain those people because perhaps they may not travel to Glasgow for a variety of reasons. So we wanted to maintain that relationship. I think there's a general consensus, and I know this from the African Motion, for example, who were online. People don't want to watch too many things online. We are sick of it. We want to be in the room with real people, talking to people, seeing the reactions, seeing cinema on the big screen, and that's definitely reflected in our figures. Obviously, we're selling lots of tickets for the cinema and a minimal amount for the online, but the online is still working really well for those areas we think where people may be having difficulty in coming back, just to engage with us. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
It doesn't affect the premiere status because what we're doing is showing the films in the cinema first before they go online.
Yeah, okay.
So if you, for example, watch an audience film, it has its evening screening, then it's matinee screening.
I've watched it in Scotland on the online player in London, so it was this weird thing that was happening. I think everybody was just making up as they went along a bit during the pandemic, but I think now with these hybrid models, we're starting to see the premiere happens physically and then online is sort of an addition to that. But it's an interesting space, I think.
And I think as creatives, that online space for your films obviously complicates things in terms of, you go online early, and I think this is, maybe happening less now, but certainly, you know, in the last 12 months, it's been very hard for filmmakers because you've got this offer to go online and you can do that now, or do you wait? And then, I mean, the other thing we haven't spoken about is this idea that films have, bluntly, they have a lifespan, and it's very, very short for festivals. It's, bluntly, we'll just call it 12 months from the, you know, if you make your film in January, that's it. By December, it's all bets are off. So I did want to sort of finish us up thinking about, you know, yes, there's festivals and there's lots of scope there, but Carmen, the work that you're doing with We Are Parable, and also Rachel with Alchemy, there are other alternatives for film. So maybe we might just want to talk about how to navigate that outside of a strict festival scenario.
Yeah, I suppose whether you're a filmmaker or a curator and sort of just trying to get more of a grip of the landscape, there's obviously film festivals, which we've talked a lot about, but also, you know, depending on where you're based, have a look at arts and film organisations as well. Often a lot of arts organisations practice in sort of rural spaces. So I'm based in the Scottish Borders, and although we have a film festival, we also run a lot of residency programmes for filmmakers and developmental opportunities, talks, a lot of different events. And I think often when we're just thinking, where do I put my film, maybe we can forget about things like that. Also working with organisations, the question I think becomes less about how do I develop an audience and maybe more how does an audience develop my film. If you're working with a sort of organisation in a specific context, there's sort of opportunity to be collaborative, to be multidisciplinary. So just sort of, you know, when you're doing all that research in your bedroom about the policies of film festivals, also look at, kind of widen the net and say about where else could I screen my film. A lot of organisations will show film in alternative space, but will also run sort of workshops or events to support a film, not necessarily in a cinema context.
And Carmen, can you talk us a bit more about, with the work that you're doing with We Are Parable, how does that work? Because they're not necessarily all brand new films, but that you're curating them with your colleagues in a really interesting way for audiences.
Yeah, so they work, you know, on new releases and new films, but they've been contacted by short filmmakers in the past and they've helped them kind of create a really exciting, like, premiere experience around the film. They did a number of them online during the pandemic, but they've done in-person events. You know, films that hadn't necessarily been picked up by festivals, or perhaps, as we've spoken about, have kind of got to the end of that lifetime. And they have, you know, they just have a really strong audience base and connection with this audience. And like Rachel said, they're kind of able to give audiences other routes in and kind of have additional things going on to kind of bring it outside of the screening, you know, and think about other ways that you can kind of engage audiences with your screen. And there's just so many. I think, you know, in the last few years we've seen a lot of like really exciting new kind of independent exhibitors coming out, and I think it's really worth kind of looking at what different people are doing. And again, I think it, like we said, it kind of really starts with who do you want to see your film and how do you want them to experience it, and then who's out there like speaking to the audiences already. I work with kind of an organisation based in rural Scotland as well, Campbell Line. So they're an arts organisation and they have kind of in-house art exhibits, and they curate a film programme that kind of speaks to their exhibit in some way, and they have workshops and other kind of events that happen around these films. So that's like also another really interesting way of kind of screening your work. That can come after that time if you feel like that festival run, you know, didn't kind of give you what you wanted in terms of your engagement with audiences. It doesn't have to be the end of your journey. And you also have to remember that for a vast majority of like sort of mainstream audiences are not necessarily going to festivals. They don't necessarily know what's on at festivals, and they miss films. It takes them a lot of time for films to get on their radar, and by that time they've gone through the circuit. And if you give them another opportunity, you know, screen it with an independent exhibitor, like people, you know, will be watching it there for the first time and will find it as exciting and new as they would have done at festivals. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's a terrifically exciting note for us to end on. I would like you to all give a huge round of applause for my terrific colleagues up here on this panel. And as the clock strikes 5:30, there's a whole wide world of film festival out there tonight. So I hope you've got screenings planned. Alison, what's your big shout for this evening? If you're going to see one film, I know this is mean, but you've got to, you know.
I literally have no idea what's going on. I know I do. I mean, we've got Silent Lands on tonight. That's really great. And there's something on later. Tony, help me out. I can see you. Come on, man. Keep me right.
I know that feeling.
No, that's already sold out. Happening, International Women's Day. I forgot that. Happening. And there's a recorded Q&A with the director and Edith Bowman after that. So thank you, everybody. I hope you've all got your tickets.
You're spoiled for choice. So thank you very much for coming. It's great to see so many people.
Thank you, guys.